What's poppin', y'all? So today I wasn't gonna make this type of video. I was gonna talk about vaccinations, but today we found out the news that Henry Kissinger, one of the most prolific and one of the most controversial Secretary of States and National Security Advisor, had passed away at the age of 100. So if you're not familiar with Kissinger, basically he was the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, which are two separate positions. It's very rare for someone to hold both of them, but basically he started under Nixon starting in 69. He had advised 12 presidents from John F. Kennedy to Joe Biden, but he has been accused of many different war crimes as well as many different interventions, not only in Asia but also in South America and all that. But the biggest thing I want to talk about is his actions during the Cambodian as well as the Vietnam War. So many people are familiar with the Vietnam War, but if you're not familiar with the Cambodian War, it's often recognized as an offshoot of the Vietnam War. Basically, it involves the peoples or the Army of Vietnam, which is North Viet Cong, basically the side that was with the communists. Basically, they wanted to protect their bases that they had in Eastern Cambodia, which was seen as a neutral state, to help their effort to go into South Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. And so usually, how that goes, tensions arise, people getting tired, and basically revolt happens. And after years of fighting, it ended in 1975 with the Khmer Rouge, which were also aligned with communist sentiments, basically established the democratic Kampuchea, and basically ended the war. And the war caused a huge refugee crisis in Cambodia, with 2 million people, more than 25% of the population, displaced from rural areas. And what was born out of that was Operation Menu and Operation Freedom Deal. But to really go into depth about Operation Menu, it basically was an order of carpet bombings to take place into Cambodia to try and, eliminate the Khmer Rouge, or like I say, the Viet Cong, at the time of Operation Menu, to basically to destroy their bases and to hamper their assault going on into South Vietnam. And so really the reason why Operation Menu has got his name, basically they use kind of like breakfast items and like stuff like top secret code names. So breakfast was the site of the first bombing, lunch was the site of the next bombing, the next remaining missions, base area 609, these are areas on the map. Snack, base area 351, dinner, base area 352, and so on and so forth. So when this was all said and done, about 3,800 B-52 sorties were launched against these targets, as well as 108,823 tons of ordnance were dropped in these missions. And Nixon and Kissinger went to great lengths to keep these missions secret. Like they had this like this because not only none of us knew about this till recent memory, but pretty much this was during the time as when like American sentiment with the Vietnam War was going down, and like if it found out that the U.S. government was bombing civilians in Cambodia, then that would be a problem. Now in terms of just this campaign alone, there is no really big estimate of like how many people were unalive during this. This is relatively a short campaign with just a few targets. I think 6 targets in total, and basically it had a non-combatant population of 4,200. But this also gave way to Operation Freedom. Now, when we talk about Operation Freedom, this was an extended 3 years of campaigns against, the not only the Viet Cong or the People's Army of Vietnam, but this also was against the Khmer Rouge, basically the communist Bass, group that was going against the Cambodian government. And so this took it to the extreme level. Just trying to look at the numbers of it. Basically, when you're talking about how many people were unalive during this time, basically it is a rough estimate that nearly every square mile of land was hit by bombs, with roughly 500,000 tons of bombs dropped in this land. And so this is about 1/2 of the country that was affected by this campaign. So it has been estimated from a wide range of 30,000 to 600,000 have been cited throughout various reports throughout history, and we will never probably get a confirmed like number, because not only was this operation illegal, it was done in secret, and it's just like they pretty much try to keep this raps hush hush, everybody like this type stuff. So Henry Kissinger fits in the equation. He basically was the Secretary of State as well as the National Security Advisor during this. Like, he would have called some type of shots. He would have known some of it. He would have been an integral part of this, because Secretary of State, what their main job is to handle foreign relations, especially when it comes in times of war. So it's not like he would have not known something like this would have happened, especially being right next to Nixon. And to quote New York Times itself, they have another article which I can't access right now for y'all, but basically Kissinger basically told the military to strike anything that flies or anything that moves, with the report that at least 50,000 civilians were unalived. And so to look at these transcribed, messages that were transcribed from Kissinger and Nixon themselves, I just had a call from my friend. He's referring to President Nixon. Kissinger told his aide, the president wants a massive bombing campaign in Cambodia. Kissinger told Haig he doesn't want to hear anything. It's an order. It's to be done. Anything that flies on anything that moves. You got that, which is quoting directly from the New York Times article. In the article they also had too. And basically he hung up the phone and all that. So he was a shot caller in this. Let's just be honest. He was a shot caller in this. And, I get that he probably didn't make the plans for the bombing campaign, or he didn't make the plans for this, but he was playing the game of telephone to get this down and tell people like, hey, you need to order this. This is what he wants, all this. And it's not enough to say that, oh, he was just working there. Like, it's basically saying that, the stuff that happened during the hollow, what, basically you wouldn't implicate the soldiers that helped carry that out, because yes, they might not make the plans for it, but at the end of the day, they carried out the mission in order to be able to, unalive so many people during that time during World War II. And it's just they're as culpable as Kissinger is in this, as well as fact historians have noted that because of these, bombings, there is a good chance that this type of destruction and dysfunction that it caused allow for the Khmer Rouge regime, the communist regime, to rise up and to really, take over the Republic of Cambodia, and eventually led to about 2 million people, which is 1/4 of Cambodians at that time, to be unalived by that regime during its, taking over Cambodia. So let's just say, at the bare minimum, he didn't unalive many people in the initial bombings. You now have a situation where somebody has risen up and to really take charge of that dysfunction to get power, and they are unaliving people on the opposition side. Now, with the whole thing going on with Israel and Palestine, that is the central part of the conflict. H, not gonna say the full name, I don't need to monetize, but basically H, may have unalive a lot of Israelis, but let's not forget, H didn't just come out of nowhere. H came after 75 years of Israel doing a lot of devious stuff against, Palestinians, one of which was Nabak. Basically was a whole campaign to unearth people from their homes in order for Israel to expand, and that included unalivings of a lot of Palestinians and a lot of many different massacres. And with that dysfunction, H rose up and it contributed what happened this year on October 7th. So what I'm trying to say is just like, at the very least, if you didn't unalive people in initial bombings, you did give a situation where people rose out of the ashes to take control and be able to, seek out their quote unquote revenge on their enemies at the end of the day. So what I'm trying to say is Kissinger is implicated in this some way or another. The last point I want to bring up is that although that, there are these big World War implications that took place during Kissinger's, campaign that caused regimes to rise, republics to fall, and just unimaginable loss and damage, there's also things like the human cost that we need to take in consideration of this, in terms of the bombing of Nik Long community in Cambodia that was accidentally bombed due to a beacon malfunction, or just kind of like miscommunication with beacons and all that. The more details will be in the article I will link down below, but pretty much the bombing went off on August 7th of 1973. While at the time that many people didn't really think the damage was considerable, with Nik Long, people referred to it, oh, it was a mistake of war, it'll be fine. About 137 Cambodians were unalive in the Nik Long bombings, opposed to, the 268 that were wounded, while they were making all these comments about it being small. But months later, Kissinger and then Secretary of Defense James R. Slinger confided that the U.S. had actually paid out Solitium for 273 unalived and 385 seriously wounded, with 48 who suffered mutilation and 46 victims of slight injuries. And to end this note, basically 2 weeks after the bombing of Niklong, the U.S. ambassador of Cambodian basically decided to start paying out settlements to the families, and these payments were sent out to the next of kin of those that were unalive. Basically, they totaled it as about $400 each. And while a lot of people might think over $400, you need to understand that the primary breadwinner for, you know, families were the main ones that were unalived in this campaign. And so when you think about $400 at the time of that, you know, payout, it was equivalent to about 4 years of earnings for a rural Cambodian at the time. Just one Cambodian. This doesn't include family or, you know, friends and all that. This is a payment for one Cambodian, which is not enough to replace, you know, not just a life, but also the years and years of struggle they're gonna have to go through in order to rebuild not only their house, their lives and all that, but to be able to sustain their living. But the crux of it is that not only did they not actually receive the $400, but they actually valued about, you know, each, you know, unalive person at 218 apiece. So they weren't even going to get the payment they were promised by the US government. Let that really sink in. Like, your family member was unalived in a US campaign, a bombing campaign, and now the government don't even think your family life is worth, you know, the full promise they were trying to keep. And the biggest thing I want to say about Kissinger is, like, yes, the man is gone. Yes, the man has been unalive. Yes, he's not living with us no more. But at the end of the day, his impact to the world in many different cases, you know, it really affected a lot of people's lives. And I think that's something we need to be, you know, cognizant of as people are, like, kind of quote unquote mourning him. Because yes, I'm all for, you know, getting people retribution and getting people, you know, punished as they're alive, just as I feel like they should get their flowers as they are alive. At the end of the day, he has had an impact on the world that we need to really just study and make sure, like, we really just critique at the end of the day, because he has caused a lot of suffering in many people's lives, whether by accident, whether on purpose, whether it was in the, you know, goal of, you know, expanding US, you know, power and all that. Is one of those things that we need to consideration as, you know, people are, like, reflecting on his life and, like, the many different aspects of it. But that being said, that has been Pop Health today. So if you like what you see today, like, subscribe, turn post notifications, all that wonderful good stuff. If you want to see more of my reaction videos, here's one right here. I definitely implore you to go see. But other than that, stay warm, stay frosty, stay dry, especially if you're in Texas. Definitely raining right now, and peace out.